Much of the discussion that we've had over the past couple of days has revolved around reaching the customer of tomorrow. So as the luxury industry evolves, how does it adapt to shifting global consumer behaviors? And how does an industry founded on qualities such as tradition, heritage, and craftsmanship address today's demanding, fast-paced landscape? Most importantly, how do we communicate with consumers on their own terms, which today obviously means digital channels? So I'm delighted here to have two experts in this area to discuss this with us. Alison Bringé is an industry expert and thought leader, shaping the way that fashion, luxury, and cosmetic brands bridge the gap with technology. Alison is known for helping brands leverage data and technology as a game changer in the creative industries. Maureen Uluwole is a luxury industry thought leader in digital transformation and innovation at Facebook in France, where she leads Facebook and Instagram's global luxury division. So we're very fortunate. Both of them are going to present initially, and then we're going to have a discussion. So, Alison, would you like to kick us off, please?
I'd love to.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do the long walk to get the clicker. Great. Well, thanks again. As Greg mentioned, my name is Alison Bringé. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Launchmetrics. For those of you that don't know Launchmetrics, we are a software and data analytics company working with more than 1,000 brands in the fashion, luxury, and cosmetic space. Some of those brands are here in the room: Tiffany's, Gucci, Pitti Uomo, and we help them understand who their key opinion leaders are, give them tools to activate those voices, and most importantly, the data that I will share with you today, help them benchmark those performances against industry standards, their competitors, and what's happening around the world. So before we talk about what is the customer of tomorrow and how you should reach them, I thought it would be really key to talk about what's happening now. So all of us, we're not Gucci, and not all of our customers are this dreamy customer of tomorrow today. But what we all do feel is that there's this millennial state of mind permeating within our industry. And because of that, we as executives, we need to think about how we balance our strategy and our communication mix to reach the customer of today, as well as the customer of tomorrow. The challenge, though, is that marketing to these two different customers is completely different. To market to the customer of tomorrow, they have a different customer journey. They don't want to be interrupted as they look for new products, as they look for new services, and the way they get inspired is different than we used to get inspired yesterday. So that means things like social media are even more critical than ever. And actually, this concept of influencer marketing and peer-to-peer marketing takes reign. So if you think about our customer now, which is driving 70% of most of our revenue, cares about things like authenticity or prestige and luxury, but the customer of tomorrow, and a bit of the customer of today, is thinking more about sustainability, which of course we've spoken a lot about over the last 2 days, but they also care a lot about this concept of authenticity and accessibility. So as luxury brands, we need to balance the two. How do we plan for the customer now that's driving revenue? And how do we think about the customer that by 2025 will represent 40% of luxury goods consumption? And to see how we reach that customer, we need to understand what's working today. And to be able to measure that, you need one currency, something that helps you identify and evaluate everything across different types of interactions, different types of channels, whether it's print, online, or social, as well as different voices like influencers, traditional media, owned media. And our currency at Launchmetrics is called Media Impact Value. Basically, what Media Impact Value is, it's our machine learning algorithm that essentially assigns a monetary value to every interaction, every article, and every post. So quantifying your brand's performance against industry standards, itself, and its competitors. So let's think about what's happening today, and let me show you a few examples of brands that are really leveraging these different voices to create value. So at Launchmetrics, we've used our data of over 20,000 brands, 500,000 news sources, and 50,000 key opinion leaders to pull together the landscape of what's happening across the US, Africa, and Asia. I should have said this at the beginning. All of these slides will be available through the wonderful team at Condé Nast. So feel free to take pictures, but also don't worry, you'll get your own copy to take home back to your businesses. So I think it's no surprise, as I mentioned, the customer of today, they really care about traditional media. So in the landscape behind me, you can see that 60 to 65% of the media impact value for fashion and luxury brands today is coming from traditional media. Now, if this was a beauty-focused conference and we were only talking about beauty, you would be shocked, because actually in that industry, and I think the team at Estee Lauder can probably attest to that, their customer journey really is speaking to these new age medias like social media and influencer marketing. But here, fashion and luxury, we still care heavily about what's happening in traditional media. That said, you can see the influencer marketing channel and the voice there is quite strong, especially in markets like the US and Europe, where of course influencer marketing is something we've been talking about a lot over the last 5 years. So that's growing strong, and in Africa we see that this is an opportunity, which I'll come back to later in my presentation. Owned media is another channel, again, to reach this new customer that we see it's doing quite well around the world. And if you look at the two new media channels, owned media and influencer marketing, and you compare this to what I said about the customer of today and the customer of tomorrow, you can see that balance is quite clear right now, and it's our job to think about how we balance the two. So if you imagine owned media and influencer marketing 5 years ago, these numbers would have been 5 times smaller than what they are today. So on to the examples that I told you I wanted to share. First, I'm going to take you to New York, where Ralph Lauren has done something extraordinary as they celebrated their 50th anniversary. So I think a question we all have in fashion is, what is the value of Fashion Week today? We invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in these shows and presentations, and what's the ROI? So Ralph Lauren did a really great job of answering that question, and actually our data points directly to this. When we look at the goal and the value that these shows can bring our brands, it's no longer just about an industry event, but it's really about connecting with the customer of tomorrow. And that's exactly what they did. They planned a 360-degree campaign that helped them connect with these customers, leveraging different voices, and of course, the voice of the influencer, which was key. They built different paid campaigns with influencers, and because of that, 46% of this 38 million came from influencer marketing. This one post alone from Chiara had a media impact value of $300,000, and it was the #1 performing post of a paid influencer ad during New York Fashion Week that season. The other question that we see on the other side of the pond is, what is the value a new designer brings to a brand, and how do you equate that in dollars and cents? So I loved this example of Riccardo Tisci's first season with Burberry and what that meant for the brand. So if you think about when you start a new brand, you have to create awareness. But also, when you have a new designer, you have to create awareness. You have to re-engage your audience who've been a fan for a while, and you have to engage new audiences. And that's exactly what Burberry did. Leveraging traditional media, which we know is the voice of awareness, they were able to garner 45% of their media impact value that first season through traditional media. Additionally, with Tisci's large influencer celebrity following, they were able to use influencers to legitimatize that new voice, and they had a full social media campaign, which many of you will remember, with all of the influencers snapping selfies of themselves with the new Tisci Burberry logo, and the two combined garnered 86% of the media impact value. Then, of course, here in Africa, there are great designers leveraging different voices to create value. I love this example. On the left, you see what I showed you before, the traditional voice split here in Africa. But on the right, you see one brand pushing the norm. And this is Orange Culture. It's a designer from Nigeria, most noted for being one of the LVMH prize nominees. And through this excitement, this brand has not only garnered attention here in Africa, but abroad. But instead of just staying abroad and growing the business, they've, as Greg actually put it so well in his presentation yesterday, have been leveraging their own social media to create deeper connections with their audience. And because of that, 47% of their media impact value today is coming from their own media channel. So we have this quote we love at Launchmetrics, and we steal it from the luxury watch industry. But who better to buy a Rolex than someone who already owns a Rolex? So really thinking, how do you engage the people that already love and care about you? Owned media. So the opportunity for the future, well, it's the voice I haven't really spoken a lot about, and it's the one that we know in the US and Europe is everywhere. Influencers. Using our media impact value algorithm, we've pulled together some data about the top performing influencers over the last 3 months for our customers here in Africa and abroad. maybe you're a little surprised that I've put up these ones on the left because they have not high follower count, but the truth is that just represents the maturity of influencer marketing here in Africa. It's still new, untouched, and very trustworthy. The customer here, they know it's not professionalized like it is in Europe or in the US. So they're there, ready to listen, ready to engage. And if you remember the values that this new customer looks for, it's authenticity. And who better to bring it to them than their peers? So if I can tell you really in dollars and cents, ROI and data, why influencer marketing is going to be key for those brands here in Africa and the brands that want to enter into Africa, it's this behind me, right? The ROI for these influencers, one, it's a very low barrier for you guys to work with them because the market has not matured yet. So the barrier and the cost to enter is low. But the opportunity is that the engagement is quite high, or even better than some of the most mega stars that we see in the rest of the world. And we really believe it's going to be a key driver. So my takeaway for all of you, Susie asked Marco yesterday, how do I replicate the Gucci effect? What's the secret recipe? At Launchmetrics, I can't tell you what Gucci's secret recipe is, even if they're a client, but I can tell you that what you need to do to be successful is look at the data. Think about every goal that you have for your campaign. Is it awareness? Is it legitimacy? Is it increasing share of wallet? And choose the right voice to activate that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie, and thank you, Condé Nast International, for inviting me to join today. My name is Marina Lawale, and I lead the global luxury division at Facebook and Instagram based in Paris. And this fun picture here is when I celebrated my 12th year at Facebook in September of last year. What I want to share with you today are a few key trends and highlights that we're observing in the luxury industry. First, I'll start with the graph that you see behind you, which is essentially an extract of the BCG True Consumer Luxury Study, where they assess the impact of different channels on the consumer's decision to purchase. So you'll see here, in 2013, social media was at the bottom of the rank in terms of influence and impact on consumer decision to purchase. If we fast forward to what that looks like, a few years later, 4 years later to be exact, the impact of social media on luxury consumer decisions to purchase is number one, an increase of 29 points in just 4 years. So this is why Facebook as a company invests in this sector, because we know that there's true impact here, and we are building strong partnerships with our brand partners. And so what I wanted to also show you is just a bit of information and insight as to what the luxury consumer looks like and does on Instagram specifically. So first, the consumer, they're using the platform 7 times a day, meaning every single day. Fashion consumer specifically, you open Instagram 50 times a day. So that gives you a bit of context as a brand, how often you need to be present and engaging with them on the platform. And they follow and engage with 2.5 times more accounts. And they also, a high percentage of them, over 50% of them, use the platform to learn about new trends and to learn about new information in fashion and in luxury. As a company, we're focusing on a number of different trends which are very relevant and specific to luxury. I'm going to give you a quick overview of each of these trends and also share what some of our partners are doing already on our platforms. First, videos. Videos have always been a priority of Facebook since they were launched in 2007. Next, stories. Instagram Stories, notably, since it was launched in August of 2006, is the fastest growing functionality we've ever had. And then the third aspect on messaging. I'll talk a little bit about WhatsApp Messenger and also Instagram Direct. And finally, the subject that's been on the minds of lots of folks is on shopping. So starting off with video. Video, you can think, okay, video has existed, excuse me, for years. And so what does it mean, and how can you engage with video on Facebook and Instagram? So it's important to understand how people watch videos on our platforms. So the first behavior we observe is what we call short, lighthearted, quick, on-the-go video viewing behavior. So these are folks who are waiting at the doctor's office, waiting at the train station, and just have a few minutes to be able to watch some quick videos in their feed on the platforms. The next behavior that we observed is more long-form viewing. This is perhaps when you go to bed at night, when you find yourself spending 30 minutes scrolling through different content on the platforms. But this is when people are more posed, have more time to spend. And so it's important to think about what content you build for these two different kinds of behaviors that we observe on our platforms. I wanted to show you an example here. This is Cartier for the launch of Guerlain de Cartier, the iconic bag that was able to take advantage of our platforms to rethink their video content, meaning they built and shot the content for this Instagram experience. So you see the product, you see the brand in the first 3 seconds, you know what it is you're looking at. And they also took advantage of the different placements that we have. So they also, excuse me, going back. So they were also able to take advantage of stories and share a little bit about what the Guerlain de Cartier can represent on stories. And speaking of which, stories. Today, we have stories across different platforms that we own. So the first one that you'll see is, of course, on Instagram. So stories on Instagram, as I mentioned, were launched in August of 2016, have really been the way, which is now the #1 way that people consume content on Instagram is via stories. So important to think about that when you're thinking about your content development strategy. Second piece, on Facebook. We also have stories on Facebook, and we're seeing very strong usage, and I'll show you some figures after this, via Facebook stories as well. And next, WhatsApp stories. Now, WhatsApp is very particular because WhatsApp is present in certain markets. So if you're in the US, you might not even realize that you can create and share stories on WhatsApp because WhatsApp is very much an internationally dominant tool in different markets like Brazil, India, Italy, etc. And then the last piece that we can't forget, of course, are messenger stories. So you have different placements where brands can communicate your brand story with consumers on all our different placements and platforms. What do the numbers look like? These are big numbers. So if we start first looking at Facebook and Messenger, the number of people that use stories, post, share, consume stories on Facebook, 300 million. This is a very, very big number, use stories on Facebook. On WhatsApp, I just mentioned, 450 million. To give context, there are 1.5 billion people using WhatsApp around the world. 450 million of them use stories every day. And then, of course, Instagram, that I've already mentioned, is also our next biggest platform where we have over 500 million people using stories as well on the platform every day. And you can see that advertisers and brands are getting into this behavior because they understand and see the value that you should be present where your clients, where your customers are, and that's to engage on stories. To show a couple of examples here, so Alison referenced Ralph Lauren that really made a big splash last year with their 50th anniversary campaign. And so here, they created a number of different types of content to make sure that they could tell the stories of these 50 years of Ralph Lauren on stories across Instagram and across Facebook. And Prada, who's also the next partner that really thought about how to launch their latest spring-summer collection, accessories collection, via stories, playing with different view frames, making sure that even if the content was not necessarily shot for a vertical frame, they thought about how to make it fun and how to integrate it into this vertical experience. And then the next piece here is on messaging. Messaging is the next wave, and we'll talk about this with Greg a bit later as to how consumers communicate. Our messaging platforms today consist of messaging across Messenger, across WhatsApp, and across Instagram Direct. And we're seeing different behaviors across each of the platforms. I'll start with Messenger. 1.3 billion people use Messenger globally, which is really how people have made a natural link with their Facebook experience to communicate with their friends and family. WhatsApp is a different kind of behavior that we're seeing. We're seeing micro-commerce happening on WhatsApp. We're really building also for the customer service experience. On the continent here, for example, we see that there are 24 million people using WhatsApp per month in South Africa, 18 million using WhatsApp per month in Nigeria. And then the third piece, it's very young, it's very new, is Instagram Direct. we're going to build Instagram Direct over the next couple of years to make it a really strong and powerful tool, especially for businesses to communicate with their consumers. And if I just go here, just to show a couple of examples of how brands are really taking advantage of this experience on Messenger. The first is IWC, that wanted to tell a story about the IWC Spitfire, where they allowed consumers to be immersed into a Messenger experience where they can ask questions, and this is a Messenger bot, ask questions, get more details about the history of the piece, and really interact in an immersive way with the brand. And then the next example here, which is really cool, is Sephora, who went even one step further to integrate augmented reality into their Messenger experience. You can see here behind me where they allow people to try on different looks, different makeup, before they even go to the store. So that's really transforming the way brands, especially beauty brands, can communicate and allow consumers to experience the products before they actually step into a physical store. And the next aspect here I wanted to show you, shopping. Shopping is our most exciting feature on Instagram, and we're really going to make sure that we work on shopping over the next number of months and also number of years. The first piece I wanted to showcase to you here are some features that we've launched on shopping on Instagram. First, you have the opportunity to save posts that are tagged as shopping posts in your feed. This allows you to create essentially your shopping list. The next piece here is that as a brand, you can have a shop option available on your profile. And so when people go to your profile on Instagram, they can see all the different products that are tagged as shopping, scroll and browse, and go eventually to your website to purchase. And then the third piece is on video. Shopping used to be available only with still images, and now we've created the video experience for Instagram shopping on Instagram. So we're really thinking about how to make this as rich as possible. And then the last piece here that I'm going to show you, which is a feature that we launched just a couple of weeks ago, is on checkout. Brands now have the possibility, it's a very small alpha test, so this is going to take time, to allow consumers to see your product, go all the way to payment within Instagram. So this is a very small test we're doing to figure out how shopping on Instagram can transform the way people purchase products. So lots of exciting things to come. And so to conclude and close out here, our different priorities are videos, our stories, messaging, and shopping. And this is where, as a set of platforms, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, we're going to go in the coming months and coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. So let's get back to the customer for a moment. Maybe, Alison, you could start us off. So obviously the luxury customer is by definition global and local. Is it possible to have a global strategy, or do you always have to think about specific marketplaces?
I love that term glocal, because I think that's quite key. And we find that across all different voices and all different channels. But with reaching the customer of today and tomorrow, brands, of course, need to have one strategy. Every brand stands for something, but how you communicate that in every market needs to feel authentic to the market. And also, you need to use the channels and outlets that are relevant to that marketplace. So if you saw the voice mix here that I showed you, in Africa, influencers is still quite growing, where traditional media has a very strong footprint. So why not think about those channels? Whereas maybe if you look at Asia, it's a market that there's not as much trust when it comes to traditional media. So as a brand, you really need to think about targeting your customers on the channels they feel are more relevant to their market and relevant to them.
Maureen, from your perspective, how do brands test the best approach for them when it comes to using your particular platform?
So it's important that brands understand who their consumers are.
Okay.
And so we have tools that allow brands to analyze essentially their audience, to be able to give them insights and understand who are the people that are talking about and engage with my brand, to be able to make decisions such as creative development, make decisions such as campaign management, and also to be able to measure the impact of that on our platforms.
Okay. Now, I think that it's important that we're in a room full of people working in creative industries. And obviously, we're all now being given so much data about how we perform, and we're all looking at dashboards every day. Is it important, Alison, that we're making decisions that are data in the creative industry specifically, that our decisions are data informed but not necessarily data led, if you can kind of pass that distinction. So we're using the data to help us make good creative decisions, but we're not necessarily being dictated to by that.
Yeah, I think you always have to find a balance. I think you can use data to inform your decisions. A lot of people also use data to validate their decisions. So it's a chicken and egg. And I clearly believe too that not every good idea is going to be born from data, but that when you know something doesn't work, that's when you really need to let the data lead the way.
So it's almost like A/B testing.
Exactly.
Okay, so presumably you do a lot of that.
Yeah, we have a model we call test and learn. So because Facebook is a young platform, it's been 15 years only that Facebook has been created, and you have some brands that have existed for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so the way that we approach working with our partners is let's pick a topic, let's pick a hypothesis, run an A/B test, and figure out what comes out of that.
So that's interesting. We've got brands that have been around for 100 years, and they've also been thinking about media in a very specific way for a long time in terms of the way that they tell stories. And you can do wonderful things, obviously, with print, and that's the way that kind of, traditionally luxury brands have communicated. How do they start thinking about giving consumers that luxury experience in a very different format, in that screen? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so I share a little bit of insight just from BCG about the impact of different mediums on consumers' decision to purchase. And the reality is that the consumer behavior has changed, meaning that we now see the affluent consumers, they are born with essentially their mobile in hand. Affluent consumers versus the average consumer, they have 4 devices versus the average consumer that has 2 devices. So they're more digital. The affluent consumer also is younger, and so how to think about building brand loyalty with this consumer. And they're also shopping in different ways. So I just showed you the example of commerce. So as Michaela said this morning, it's not a question of having the brand redefine their core values, but it's redefine and rethink how to communicate with the consumer, knowing that their behavior has changed. They're more mobile, they're more digital, so you have to be where the consumers are.
Best practice on that. How should people start thinking about that when maybe there are some brands in the room that really haven't thought too hard about how best to reach those consumers in new ways?
Yeah. So in luxury, content is king, or we can even say content is queen. So it's best to start with content. And when brands are thinking about how they share their content and their brand imagery with the world, traditionally they've thought about traditional media outlets. So it's important from the inception stage to really integrate digital and especially mobile into the conception of creative, meaning when a campaign is being shot, shoot for mobile. Shoot for a full screen vertical experience versus just a classic 16:9 landscape experience.
Okay. Now, Alison, from your perspective, do you still think there's plenty of room for luxury brands to really think about utilizing social more, or do you think that there is just so much content out there that, maybe sort of like stepping back and having sort of like some real moments of impact is the best way to move forward?
And I would say this if we weren't on this panel together, but I've been on this mission for the last 6 months preaching to our clients about the value of owned media today. Something super interesting that came up in one of our research studies recently is that during Fashion Week, for example, the number of posts per brand has decreased, but the value per post has increased. So I think what brands are finding, and some of that is the brands that are just coming to the market, getting more involved with social media, some that have been there, is that it's no longer about just posting to post, but it's really thinking through that creative strategy and having really unique content relevant to that channel that's performing better. So I don't think it's too late, but I think, as you mentioned, they should really think about why is the customer there, why are they there, and what do they want the action to be? Is it awareness, is it discovery, is it purchase? And leveraging the different voices to create that.
So it's figuring out the intent at the very beginning of that journey.
Yep.
So you mentioned the Ralph Lauren example. Can you talk us through a couple of other kind of luxury brand examples where you've seen really kind of great examples of best practice?
Sure. So Michael Kors, that's another one I really like. As I said, owned media is really important, and there's this kind of balance between owned media and influencers. One thing Michael Kors has done a really great job of is leveraging influencers to build content for their owned media campaigns. So again, I'm coming to your channel. I don't want to see something that I've seen everywhere else. I mean, you could talk about this so much more. I don't want to see something that I can read anywhere else. And really, as I said too, there is this kind of perfect balance between traditional media, owned media, influencers, but if you aren't carving out what the difference is, but Michael Kors essentially during their shows and during key campaigns, they work with influencers to build this unique content, but to put it on the Michael Kors channels so that you as a fan, you feel like you've been invited into something that's really special that can't exist somewhere else. We have a number of other clients too that are leveraging their owned media channels to launch key products. So again, as I said, if owned media is your vehicle to increase share of wallet with your existing customers, why not offer that existing customer something special that they can't get anywhere else? So harnessing that excitement to further engage the customer.
Maureen, do you want to jump in on that as well and talk a little bit about best practice?
Yes, absolutely. So I talked about test and learn earlier. So I wanted to talk about two activations that we've done recently with Dior Couture. So Dior, a year ago, they're launching their new set of sunglasses. And so they wanted to figure out a cool way to really test the launch of the sunglasses, and they created augmented reality filters on Facebook so people can try on the sunglasses. Again, before they have the in-store experience, they have a sense of what that can look like for them, and they just worked with us to launch a second Instagram filter for the new spring-summer collection as well.
So we're seeing so many more platforms, AR you mentioned, voice, something I mentioned yesterday in my presentation. Like, how does one provide either of you maybe would like to take this, how do you provide sort of a luxury experience in something that feels like a fairly, widespread commodity? Like social media, there's a lot of content on it. How do you provide that luxury experience?
Well, so the first aspect is that as a company, Facebook is dedicated to creating this luxury experience. So we formalized our global luxury hub in Paris 4 years ago, which I lead, to be able to do exactly what you said. Think about what the luxury consumer wants, how they behave, and how to make sure that the platform responds to that. Now, to be clear, we don't build for different brands. We don't tailor Instagram for different brands, but it's important that that input is integrated into the work that we do. So to give an example I just mentioned, so I work with our engineering teams in California, and when they were launching augmented reality filters, luxury, of course, is the most visual sector. And so they came to our team and said, how can we think about creating an experience that feels rich, that feels immersive? We want to learn from luxury brands, which is why we have some of our partners like Dior as the first and best in class examples.
So let's talk a little bit maybe more about influencer marketing. How best to sort of start figuring out the process of working with influencers for luxury brands, because obviously it's so important, of course, to get that real essence of the brand communicated.
Yeah, I think also the same question kind of relevant to what you just asked before, but and what I said in my presentation, we as brands are trying to balance this exclusivity of our industry with the inclusivity that social media has provided. Yeah. And of course, content is king and queen. So in our quest to reach the customer, be more inclusive, and to be posting and be available as much as our customers going to the different platforms, we need to leverage voices like influencers to create a more authentic voice for the brand. So first of all, I think the limitation or the challenge or the fear that comes from luxury executives when it comes to influencer marketing is that this person isn't going to represent my brand in the right way. Yep. And that's where data actually is great, because as Maureen just said, that at Facebook, there's a lot of insights to know exactly who your customer is. So if you know who your customer is, you can absolutely find the influencer that shares the same values, that engages in the same topics, and can really be this middleman between you and the audience that you're looking to target. So I would say use the data to inform who you're working with, and then trust the influencers to build content that they know is right for their audience. I mean, while we feel like influencers, we are not influencers. We don't create content 24/7, well, most of us. Some lovely gentleman in the front row has done a great job of becoming an influencer and emulating the influencer state of mind. I think he's still here. But I think it's important that luxury brands also take a step back, inform the influencer what their goal is, how they want to target their audience, but let the influencer's work speak for itself.
think Morrison's got some thoughts on this.
Yes, so from a notably Instagram point of view, I'll be very honest here, we've been late to the game as a company, which is ironic because you see most influencer activity happening on Instagram. So what we have done in the past is we didn't want to become the middleman or the middlewoman. We didn't want to become the agency that connected brands or influencers together, and so we've stepped out of the equation. We can't do that anymore. So what we're going to do in the coming months is really focus on 4 aspects of the influencer phenomenon. First, authenticity. It's important, and I think consumers give feedback that when they feel as though products are too branded, that they lose interest and it's less engaging for them. The second piece is on transparency. Brands want to know when I work with an influencer and they diffuse content, what's behind it? Who are they reaching? So we're going to build tools on transparency. The third piece is on integrity, especially subjects that you might have seen in the news that we've created systems to really make sure that we reduce/eliminate fake followers. So integrity is really, really important in this conversation. And the last piece is on measurement. When brands work with influencers, what does that give them? How does that measurably drive their brand equity and also eventually sales? So those are the strategic areas that we'll be focusing on to come.
Okay, so we are very close on time now, but I'd like to talk specifically about the continent that we're in, 54 countries. From both your perspectives, where do you see, what's the best strategy for luxury brands? How would, if you were running a large luxury brand, what would you be thinking about doing as trying to get new consumers into your brand?
I think that the 2 channels that I touched on in my presentation, owned media and the influencer voice, are critical. You know, in marketing, we say it costs $4 to find a new customer, $1 to continue to sell to our existing customer, and owned media is that opportunity. I think also if you think about how the customers here are communicating through messaging, WhatsApp, social media, I mean, they're already there. That's where they're coming to be inspired, discover products. So invest more in owned media and in your own strategy, the content you create, the story you tell through those channels. And then of course, don't be afraid to engage the local influencer or the local key opinion leaders to help connect you with the right audience, because of course you're new to this market and you need to make sure that what you're saying, it resonates with the customer here. And who better to be a gateway to this industry than the people that are moving and shaking here.
Maureen, how best to navigate the African marketplace?
Yeah, so as Alison said, the consumers are already here. They're already on Instagram. They're already on Facebook. So the question is how to approach them and how to use our insights to be able to figure that out. Meaning, if we start again with creative, there is normally a creative point of view, a global creative point of view created by brands. But in some markets, brands are obliged to modify that point of view, for example, in the Middle East or even in Japan, for example. So really use those insights to figure out, can I use my global voice in the market? Does that work? Are they receptive to that? Or do I need to create a more localized point of view to be able to resonate more with these consumers?
Okay, we're out of time. Thanks to both of you. Hopefully everyone in the room now knows how to navigate this shifting landscape a little bit better. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you.